So as I mentioned before, Democrats' response to Biden withdrawing from the race is to paint him as the greatest leader of all time, the most selfless man that's ever existed, et cetera, et cetera. I had the misfortune of watching some of the North Korean level propaganda that was being spouted over on MSNBC. Here's a taste of Rachel Maddow doing her best.
This is history writ large. You know, we'll all remember where we were and what we were doing at this moment. And just thinking about the president right now, you know, what a man, what a patriot, what an act of selfless devotion to your country. And he has been a phenomenal president. He brought us back from COVID. He gave us the best recovery from COVID of any major nation on earth at a time when the world has economically been struggling in the wake of COVID. The Biden economy is literally the envy of the world. He ended the presidency of Donald Trump at one disastrous term. And he did it while being decent and civil and honorable and normal, and occasionally boring at a time when boring was absolutely what we needed. And I just, his career of decades in public service as a senator and as a very successful vice president and as a phenomenally successful president, there is no single thing that he has done in that entire career that is a greater or more consequential act of service and sacrifice to this country.
So, yeah, this went on for hours. Ryan, I watched John Meacham came on and he did the whole I'm not a great man, but let me tell you who is. Oh, God. Joe Biden is a great man. And listen, I'm going to say all the obvious things. This is a man who's overseeing a genocide. This is a man whose stubbornness, ego, narcissism, et cetera, led to this place where after he pledged in 2020 to be a bridge to the future generation, then he got in his head the Trumpian, I alone can fix it, no one else can take the keys to the car from me, and his insular, circle that was really holding power as well, didn't want him to go either. And so leaves it to this place where there isn't going to be a democratic process, where voters don't really get to have a say about who they want to be the next Democratic nominee. It was a fundamentally selfish decision, and let's make no mistake about it. He has put Kamala Harris's likely successor in a very difficult position in an uphill battle in order to block Donald Trump from the White House once again. So this whole, he's a great man, his legacy, et cetera, et cetera. If it was before the genocide, I would have been sympathetic to it, because I do think on domestic policy, especially with labor and antitrust, he is better than Obama. He does represent a shift away, somewhat of an incremental shift away from the hardcore neoliberalism of the past. But you can't just hand wave away the tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have been killed by his policy.
Yeah, like you said, he suggested that he would be a one-term president. He finally buckled to an incomprehensible amount of pressure that he was under. Like, none of us can remotely understand how much power people like Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, combined with all the entire donor class, plus 65, 70% of actual Democratic voters, are able to exert on a human being.
Right.
He withstood that for weeks and then finally buckled. That does not make you a hero. It's good that he buckled under that pressure, but it doesn't make you a hero. The heroic decision is like, so Washington, when, after he wins the Revolutionary War, he actually goes back to farming. Like the Cincinnatus at the time, like the King George famously said, if he does that, he's the greatest man alive. And look, now he's got his own genocide and slave owner. So we're not going to say he's the greatest man alive, but he was under pressure to take power and refused it.
Yes.
Biden was under pressure not to take power and buckled to that pressure.
That's right.
Completely different situations.
Adam Tooze actually had a good tweet about this. He said, so monarchical is Americans' conception of presidency that Biden is feted as a ruler who, quote, gave up power in favor of anointed successor rather than a vain politician who misjudged his sell-by date and has been belatedly persuaded to spare himself humiliation and give Dems a chance. Yeah. Van Jones did his own rendition of the Rachel Maddow Dear Leader mode over on CNN. Let's take a listen to that too.
Even people who are pushing for this to happen, it's kind of like when your grandpa, you got to take the keys. And everybody, you gotta take his keys, you gotta take his keys, you gotta, and he's fighting, and everybody's so frustrated. And then you finally get the keys back. And then you just cry. Because this is somebody that you love. This is somebody that you care about. This is somebody who was there for you. This is somebody, you wouldn't be here without him. And you have to take something from him. Now, this is not, look, politics is politics. But this is a human moment for one of the great humans in America. This is a huge moment for him, for his family, for all of us who love him, for all of us who wanted him to get across the finish line. But if you're a young person watching this is leadership. This is patriotism. This is what it means to put the country first and put the party first and put the cause first. When your arm gets tired, you let somebody else finish pitching the game. That's what Joe Biden has done, and he's done that for all of us. And so I just want to say, I don't know who's going to be the VP, the non-VP. I don't know anything about politics. I just know that I love this man. I care about this man. It was painful every day to sit up here and talk about him like he's just some problem for the party. Wait till we get to the convention. You're going to see people crying, standing, screaming, cheering. He may not get a chance to talk for 10 minutes. We finally get a chance to put our arm around this guy. He did the right thing for this country. He did the right thing for this party. All of us are going to be in this situation someday, and I hope that we take a moment to honor this man and to love this man. I love Joe Biden. I appreciate what he's done, and a lot of people are heartbroken today. Even if it's the right thing, it's still just horrible.
So Van Jones there openly weeping at this great, brave decision that Joe Biden was absolutely dragged to, kicking and screaming. The other thing, Ryan, over this whole process, it has been deeply disturbing and unsettling to see these supposed neutral analysts and journalists have to go out and, oh my God, I love Joe Biden. He's my favorite person. He's the best person that's ever, I adore him. He's the greatest of all time. I do anything for, you're supposed to have some sort of arm's length neutrality, not go out of your way to pledge your undying love and fealty to the dear leader. It is very disturbing.
When Jamie Raskin wrote Biden a letter shortly after July 4th, and it leaked to the New York Times just recently, it's a 4-page letter, basically urging him to step aside. The first 3 pages are just a slobbering, homage to his greatness. And that's just unhealthy. Like the kind of person where you tell yourself, you know what this guy needs? 3 pages of praise before I can do a couple
build up to the point.
Of honesty.
Yeah.
That doesn't actually say anything good about the person on the receiving end of that.
It also doesn't make your case that well, because if he's so amazing and the best leader that ever lived, maybe we can deal with a little bit of senility, right?
Yeah.
If he's so wonderful and he's like FDR and Lincoln and George Washington all rolled into one, then maybe we should just deal with the decline. It's bizarre to watch all of this.
Yeah, and given his domestic record, it is painful because you know that none of the replacement substitute candidates, Kamala Harris seems to be the one that's going to be, are going to have his administration's commitment, I don't think, to labor, antitrust, and in general, this kind of pushback against neoliberalism. We'll see, but you are kind of throwing that out with the baby.
What do you make of, Matt Stoller's been probably most aggressively making this point, but I've seen others saying as well that there may have been more ideological valence to the move against Biden among the donor set than we want to acknowledge, because certainly the Wall Street Journal editorial board, the billionaires, they did hate, they hate Lena Khan with a burning passion. They hate the antitrust stuff in particular, but they also don't love the renewed vigor of the labor movement, which has been partly enabled by Biden's National Labor Relations Board. What do you say to people who are concerned about that, and that you may, this may sort of quash those burgeoning positive pieces of Biden's domestic agenda? We'll
see. It's a live fight. But anytime that the donor class is happy and gets what it wants is bad news.
We should be uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah. So definitely. They definitely think that Kamala Harris is going to be more pliant. Now, it's hilarious because Joe Biden, his nickname for his entire career was Joe Biden DMBNA, which for those who don't know, MBNA used to be a credit card company, that was the biggest one in the world, basically. He was the politician who basically created the student debt crisis. through legislation. He backed the credit cards, backed Wall Street,
fought with Elizabeth Warren over all of this.
Elizabeth Warren, he was Delaware is the heart of corporate America.
Yeah.
He represented that beating heart for his entire career in the Senate. That he happened to be the one that broke, hopefully reflects that that's where the party is pushing. And
right.
He was just a vessel for that, because obviously that's not where his heart is.
Right. It seems to me that there's a combination of both. I am not a subscriber to the great man view of the world where it's just one person and their ideology and they decide to do the right thing or they decide to do the wrong thing, that it is more about looking at these eras. And I do think we are in an era of transitioning away from neoliberalism that Biden happens to be part of. I also think that his deep bitterness towards Barack Obama, resentment, envy, whatever you want to call it, also was part of what led him to wanting to go so big on the COVID stimulus package. Because, this is the thinking is that Ron Klain, as initial chief of staff, basically sold it to him as listen, Obama screwed up with the stimulus. You have a chance to show you can do this bigger and better, and you can, let's hang the FDR portrait in the Oval Office and you can embrace this. And so he played to his ego and his sense of grievance. And that's partly how you end up with some of the better domestic positions. And then I also think, from what we can tell, Biden is pretty checked out on domestic politics. They couldn't
talk about NATO.
All he wants to talk about is NATO or some sort of esoteric Asian Pacific pact that no one has ever heard of. That's where his heart really is. So I think also that those domestic policy pieces, they were sort of running on autopilot or with Ron Klain or whoever else was in charge over there. And he didn't care about it. He didn't have much to do with it. He was very reluctant to follow through on even approximating his student debt loan pledges, for example. He never wants to talk about it. I think he was quite checked down on the domestic policy agenda.
Yeah, and the other hopeful element of it is that not only was Ron Klain making that argument that Obama screwed up, he didn't go big enough, so was Chuck Schumer. And Chuck Schumer, so you have Joe Biden, DMBNA, and you have Chuck Schumer, his nickname was Wall Street Chuck.
Right.
And both of them just decided, the wind is blowing in this direction. We are politicians. Let's go with the wind. So the question then becomes, does the wind keep blowing? And that's a matter for basically the public.
Yeah.
To keep making sure that there's momentum in that direction, which is driving the Republican Party to embrace people like J.D. Vance, and is driving the Democratic Party to say, look, we need to go bigger and we need to actually deliver for people. So, the counter wind, of course, is coming from the donor class, which is no, we don't need this at all.
Right. No, we're good. Just talk about abortion. Yeah. Get Lena Khan out of here, and let's go back to the good old days of just neoliberalism with no concern about moving in a different direction. Speaking of Obama, we've got a little bit, Obama put out a long statement, as no one should be surprised about. Let's put B3 up on the screen, and got a little bit of a terror quote. I mean, it's the same vibes. Joe Biden's amazing. He's been one of America's most consequential presidents, as well as a dear friend and a partner to me. Today, we've also been reminded again that he's a patriot of the highest order. Since taking office, President Biden has displayed that character again and again. I mean, the Obama-Biden relationship has been, I wouldn't say Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents, but I would say the Biden-Obama relationship has been extremely, one of the most consequential, complicated relationships in history. I mean, first of all, you have this, as I was referring to before, this sense of grievance and this tension between the two when Biden is Obama's VP and Obama's the smarty pants, Ivy League, and the super intellectual, sort of high-minded, hands-off, doesn't like to sully himself with the dirtiness of, the backslapping politics. Joe Biden's on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. So you have that dynamic. Then you have in the 2020 primary, Obama does not endorse Biden until the very end. It's pretty clear he favors any number of a range of other candidates. Some of his staffers were actually working for Beto at the beginning. Let's not forget about
Dillon.
Yeah, and let's not forget about 2016 when Obama made it clear, I want Hillary Clinton, not Biden. Apparently Biden really holds on to a lot of bitterness about that. And listen, to be fair, understandably so.
Yeah.
But then, on the other hand, in 2020, it really is Obama who has to come to his rescue after he has a piss-poor performance in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. And Bernie Sanders looks like he's going to romp to the nomination. The whole establishment of the party totally freaks out. Obama helps to orchestrate everyone dropping out, consolidating around Joe. And so he owes his, ascent to, obviously, the vice presidency, his continued relevance in American politics to Barack Obama. He owes this presidency and the fact that he won the Democratic nomination to Barack Obama. And then Obama ends up being one of the key figures that sticks the knife in here at the end and takes it from him.
Yeah, couldn't write it any better. And then the key thing is Obama did not endorse Kamala Harris in that statement as well. He says, I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges. And, Kamala Harris and her team have been trying to kind of work Obama for years. Like she and they really believe that she can carry the mantle forward of that Obama coalition. Mm-hmm. And clearly the Obama folks just don't actually believe that. Now, she may end up, it looks like she's going to win the nomination anyway, but it's interesting that if she's going to do it without Obama at this point rallying behind her. Hakeem Jeffries, if we can put up this next element, said the same thing, the similar portrait of the greatness of Joe Biden, but also excluding any mention of Kamala Harris and not endorsing going forward. This tapped the brakes a little bit on the momentum of the Kamala car that was racing to Chicago with the nomination, because it gave people space to say, wait a minute, Obama isn't rallying behind her yet. Maybe there is space here. But it took a little while, and then the endorsements continued to accelerate from Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal and the CBC News. The endorsements are rolling in for Kamala. And she needs an opponent if she's going to lose.
Right.
And so far she doesn't have one.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Ryan, what do you think? So we have all the way Democrats are framing the Biden legacy, the way MSNBC and Van Jones is framing the Biden legacy. When we look back on this presidency 10, 20 years from now, what do you think will be the lasting impression? It depends on what the fallout is of what is going on currently. Like if Kamala wins or loses? No, I think so you could see the wheels just completely coming off. You could see a massive escalation that leads to a regional conflict that would be on Biden's shoulders. His refusal to end that, his refusal to get tough. When Sullivan and Blinken told Netanyahu, you have till January with this. It's July. Right. And they're still going. Right. There is such a thing as American power. They chose not to use it. So if it spins out even further beyond, now I think the world sadly will metabolize a Gaza genocide if it is constrained to that. But if it spins into this massive regional conflict, but yes, I think you're politically, if Kamala Harris gets kind of wrecked by Trump in November, then people will remember that that Biden clung on until July, and we'll fault her to some degree, but we'll also acknowledge that Biden put her in a very difficult situation. What do you think? I don't. I hope that a genocide in Gaza is a stain on him. I hope it will be. And I fear that you're right, that it won't be. That there will be this, attempt to forget that Palestinians exist, it'll be a thing that people know about. Yeah. But there'll be books written about it. But will people get arrested? Will there be actual consequences? I hope so. Yeah. I doubt it. It's hard to say, though, because we are coming to this consensus. We're going to talk more about this in the Israel bloc, about this is an apartheid state. I mean, we just had the ICJ ruling saying... They just voted against a two-state solution. So if you have one state, all these people live in it. Right. Some people have rights, others don't. Others don't. It's a pretty clear definition. It's pretty clear and undeniable definition at this point. And I do think you have, because Netanyahu has made himself such a partisan figure, I do think you have a Democratic Party that is going to move away from the type of unconditional support that Joe Biden has given to Israel. So I think it's possible that Yeah, I don't want to compare him to LBJ because I think that's sort of unfair to LBJ, but there are some echoes there in that LBJ had an extraordinary domestic political agenda that was ultimately, his legacy though was defined by Vietnam and leaving his party in a very difficult position as well. So I do think that there are some echoes there, but we'll see how it all plays out ultimately. I do think whether or not Kamala Harris wins is going to be an important part of how Joe Biden's legacy is seen.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.